We're live. Hey everybody, let us know if it's working out there. Audio seems to be good. I didn't check this, Clay. Do you want to check your audio? Give us a shout. Say hello.
Hello.
That's fine. I think I'm going to turn that down. Put on headphones, and then we're good to go. So we're here to talk about the fifth episode of The Mandalorian. It's called The
Hmm.
Gunslinger. This
Yes.
episode is written by Dave Filoni, directed by Dave Filoni. So it's
Hmm.
a Dave Filoni extravaganza. And
I don't know anything about him. I know he is very well loved in the Star Wars community for Rebels. Is that what it is?
yeah, one of the animated ones. I don't know which one that it must be Rebels. What's the other one? Attack of the Clones or something like that, or
Clone
Clone
Wars.
Wars? Yeah, Clone
Yeah.
Wars.
Yeah. I would be curious to know how people react who are fans of his specifically reacted to this episode.
I'm told that we can see and hear us, which is all that I expect. So this episode is about the Mandalorian helping a rookie bounty hunter who is in over his head. Clay, I'll start the conversation with one
Mm.
simple question that will help me
Yes.
determine how I review this episode.
Hmm.
We've talked about this before. Is this show a kid's show?
Um. I I think it's as much of a kid show as any Western from the 50s is a kid show. You know,
Yeah.
I think it has the same. I mean, the violence is probably amped up a little bit, well, considerably since it's 50, 60 years since then. But I don't think it's. I wouldn't say it's exclusively a kid show, but I wouldn't say that it's not. It's if that's a good non-answer for you.
That is a perfectly non-answer that I can use to fly off to the next thing. I think because I have nothing against kid shows, and I don't think this is bad if it is a kid show. But when what I consider to be a kid show is just a kid shows are basically like the best versions of them are training for more advanced narrative. So you basically
Sure.
you give kids a simple story that's easy to track. They don't have too many questions about what's going on. There's not a tremendous amount happening in the background or like multiple storylines running concurrently or anything like that. And you sort of
Hmm.
prime them for how they're supposed to receive stories in the future or how their brains are able to handle that kind of stuff. And while I think I maybe would agree that Westerns are simple, I think that Westerns, the best Westerns, have a little bit more going on under the hood than just a simple story. Like the action can kind of be simple, but what's actually going on is largely unspoken because they're all Clint Eastern type Westerns where the guy isn't exactly explaining how he feels about a certain situation. You just kind of have to
Oh,
infer it.
I'm talking more like Gunsmoke or Bonanza
Oh,
or
the
something.
TV shows or something
Yeah.
like that. Sure. And or maybe even Star Trek, I guess. But Star Trek's a little bit headier,
Sure.
I think, than that. But I think that whether or not how I feel about this show, and I don't know how I feel about this show at this point because I think I'm getting diminishing returns from it.
Hmm.
I just don't know if I'm personally interested in this series if it is a kid show, and if it's not a kid show, I think I actually need to be harsher on it than if it is a kid show. Do you
Hmm.
understand? So that's the problem I'm running into with talking about this one.
You know, it's funny because Dave, who's on the Star Wars movie podcast with us, his problem with the first episode was he felt he couldn't really pinpoint it, but he thought it felt kind of like a fan film, like a really um, expensive fan film. And I'm starting to feel like I know what he means because while I am really enjoying it for what it is, it seems just to be like showing off kind of a bit where there's not a ton of story stuff going on. It's like, ooh, isn't this sequence really cool? Wasn't that fun? Okay, on to the next episode. You know what I mean? Where it's like if this showed up online as a Star Wars fan film and not an episode of a branded
Disney product.
Disney thing, people would think it's the greatest thing ever made.
Yeah, probably.
And some people do think this is the greatest thing ever made. So maybe that's a bad example. I don't know. But the thing that's interesting to me about it is it reminds me of how animatronic and practical effects technology changed after CGI took over everything. They'd only use it infrequently, and when they did, it was almost like they forgot how to do it, and it didn't feel right. And Mandalorian feels like the serialized prestige TV world trying to get back to the previous era of episodic TV and not understanding what made those shows work. Like your basic episode of Miami Vice has more drama and tension to it than really any episode of The Mandalorian. And I'm not saying that not liking this show, because I thought this one actually it was incredibly straightforward, but this actually did have a couple story turns in it, whereas the last one didn't really have any story turns in it. It was just sort of like they go to this place, they help these people, and then he leaves. There wasn't really much twistiness to it. This one at least has some boilerplate plot twists to it. But it's strange because I keep thinking to myself, like, this is 35 to 40 minutes every episode, but what they're actually doing story wise feels like about 15 to 20.
It's a lot of filler in these episodes.
Yeah, well, I see, that's the thing. I feel like that's where the fan film feeling comes in, because it's I don't even know if I'd call it filler. It's just action.
Sure.
And it's just, well, maybe this one has some filler in it with the stuff with Amy Sedaris and everything. But
I mean, when I think of filler, I think of the speeder bikes in this, where you don't really need to see them
showing off.
Yeah, you don't need to see them flying over Tatooine for a fairly extended sequence in that case. Like that's the kind of, and I guess I'd hesitate to call it filler because a lot of it feels like it's aesthetically trying to do like the slow Western build to it, where they're just going to show you these long shots and it's not a lot of action and it's just kind of like building that stuff. But I think it really just, for me, comes back to, if it's a kid's story, I can't be too harsh on what the story of this episode was, because I think it works as a kid's standalone episode about, it's basically like the junior version of Unforgiven, really, is what happens in this episode. So it's a very simplified, not as good version of that, where it hits all the beats fairly quickly. The characters aren't particularly good. The characters aren't interesting enough to pull it off like Unforgiven are. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. And you go, okay, you learned something about the Mandalorian here. You learned something about the Bounty Hunter Guild. And now we're off to do our own thing. And it's very simple and all the kids can grasp it. However, if you're watching this as an adult, I don't really get anything out of this because it's so simple. And for as much world building and sort of like Star Wars-y stuff that they're doing, I still at this point don't have a grasp on what the Mandalorian is all about. Like he just accepts jobs really easily and doesn't seem to have a lot of conflict about anything that he's doing. And I don't know if that's a problem, but at the same time, there's not a lot to talk about with this show, really.
Yeah. And this is the second episode in 4 episodes or 5 episodes where he's had to fix his ship.
Yeah.
It's like, of all these things that you're doing, it's just ship maintenance is the catalyst for all your plot. I mean, if that's going to be the catalyst for everything, that's one thing. But it's just, I don't know. It doesn't feel to me like episodic inside of serialized, where you're getting episodic stuff that's moving your story forward. It just feels like the setups of each one feel fairly contrived.
He's still just vaguely on the run, right? He's still, he's not trying to get anywhere or trying to do anything at this point.
Going anywhere specific that we know of, unless he's going, I don't know, to Mandalore. Is that what the plan's called?
I think it is called Mandalore. Yeah. So I mean, I thought this was the weakest of all of them, and I think it felt like it fed off of last week's episode, which is it's a 30-minute episode, and I thought it felt long. Like I was like bored by it while it was going on. It's just like I don't know. I didn't feel it really had enough, and I thought that the characters are all very generic versions of the Unforgiven thing, where it's not really a trick or anything to it. You know what's kind of going to happen. The Mandalorian seems like he's a decent guy. He's going to go off and find the speeder or whatever, the little animal that he wants to ride back or something, leaves them alone. They kind of come to a trick. They kidnap Baby Yoda, and they have Amy Sedaris cosplaying as Ellen Ripley for some reason.
I saw someone else reference her as Rhea Perlman from Cheers.
Yes, she does. Yeah, and I don't know. This one, it felt like the least purposeful out of all of them. And it might just be that I'm running out of gas with the concept at this point if they're not going to do something bigger with it.
Yeah. I'm really gonna need. I have asked this like 3 times. How many episodes are there in the season?
3 left. There's 8.
3?
Yeah.
if they really need to do something with this story, uh, to have it be more than just him fixing his ship for 6 episodes,
Yeah.
or 9 episodes, or what's 5 + 3, 8.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I mean, like, I don't think it's terrible. Like, I think it's all perfectly finely done. It doesn't have the inherent problems that I would find in. It doesn't have like logic problems to it as
No.
far as the stuff happens. Honestly, not enough stuff happens to really have logic
No,
problems.
you'd have to be an extremely bad writer to kind of screw up what's going on in the narrative here.
Yeah. So it's like very easy, very inoffensive. Your characters are fairly one note, I guess. I don't. That's unfair. I don't know if one note is the best way to say it, but it's you know who they are very quickly, and they don't
Very
really.
archetypal, extremely
Yeah,
archetypal. Yeah.
yeah, and even I mean, I thought this guy, the young bounty hunter here, I thought he was probably one of the more interesting ones who had popped up, just because he did something fairly unexpected at the end.
Mm. I
Um,
didn't like the performance. I didn't like any of the performances in this one. Did you like his performance? Thought it
Not
was okay.
particularly. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was fine. Yeah.
Amy Sedaris just felt like it's Amy Sedaris in Star Wars. Like she kind of always plays that character. She's a funny actress and a funny comedian, but
She's playing the Tig Notaro role
yeah,
from
that's true.
Discovery,
Yeah, that's true.
or the H. John Benjamin role, where it's H. John Benjamin, but it's in space.
And this wasn't the bounty hunter or the assassin that they're kind of hunting here. She's a name actress that they kind of hyped. She's on one of the posters, isn't she? I think so. She's another example of a character that only appears very briefly, even though you thought they were
Right.
going to amount to something more than that.
Yeah, it's I think is it Ming Na Wen? Is that who?
Yeah,
it
I
is?
think that's her name. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard
You're
that, but my
being
TV
attacked.
just restarted. My TV just restarted for some reason.
It wants you to rewatch The Mandalorian and get everything
know,
that you're
yeah.
wrong about this.
The speaker that's always on, that's been installed once you put Disney Plus onto your TV, is getting sick of me shit talking their show.
Kyle brings up something here. I like the episode gave us something new at Tatooine. There was a reason to go back to see how much it had changed and how the galaxy is different after the fall of the Empire and the crime syndicates. I saw a pretty good review take on that where it was like, does anything sum up the Disneyfication of this series more than they go back to Mos Eisley and it's like a tidy bar at this point? Like the bar is no longer a crime syndicate hangout. It's like a clean thing where I would have never noticed it, but apparently that's the droid. The droid bartender is the one who's in Jabba's palace torturing the other droids, which is the callback.
Really?
Yeah, there.
Yeah.
So it's that guy who's now on the straight and narrow tending bar at this place.
Well, I actually thought this episode gets a lot of crap for being very fan servicey, but I don't really consider what they did fan servicey any more than anything else that they've done.
No,
Like,
same stuff.
This isn't any more fan servicey than having the Jawas show up in the second. And if anything, I think they actually used it constructively and actually did move the story forward. And not just, it wasn't just, oh, hey, look, it's the bar from Tatooine. The bar's being run by droids.
Mhm.
And it famously, in the first Star Wars movie, they wouldn't even let droids into the bar.
Yeah, progress.
So
Progress in this universe.
Progress. So it's, they're doing stuff, they're doing different stuff with it. I think it is an interesting look. I think given the stinger at the end of the episode is really the only explanation why they needed to go back to Tatooine, assuming it is what people think it is.
Yeah.
So if you're going there, I think they handled it pretty well.
Well, what do you think about this for a definition of fan service? If you are a fan of this franchise and you're watching these episodes, you probably get, if you're someone like Kyle, you probably get a big kick out of all the stuff that they're including that's they're not necessarily drawing attention to in terms of where it came from.
Yeah.
If you're totally unfamiliar with this franchise, I think you'd be amazed at you all you would do is watch this and go, there's a lot of empty space in this show. Like there's just nothing, if you're not picking up on the moments that they're pausing to kind of go like, look at the speeder bikes, look at this droid, don't you recognize him? You're probably sitting there going like, why is this so slow? Why is this not doing anything? And I think they might be doing the pace slow to mimic the Westerns and kind of pause on these Easter egg beats that they're showing you.
Yeah, well, See, I feel like, much like the term plot hole, I feel like fan service is being greatly overused these days. And I think it's because there are so many things that are um, continuations or revamps of previous stuff. Because I think I talked about this on one of the other shows. It's like, if you're coming to see Star Wars, don't you want to see Star Wars stuff? Like, why is showing a speeder bike fan servicey? That's like one of the things that they used to drive in the Star Wars universe.
Mm-hmm.
Why is going into if they're on Tatooine at Mos Eisley, why wouldn't they go into the bar?
Yep.
That's what it's there for.
Yep.
You know, that's a location in Mos Eisley that people. Do you want them to go to Mos Eisley and go to the place next door to the cantina? You know, it's. Sorry, just the UPS guys ringing my doorbell. I think it's a lot. That's the Disney suits are outside just waiting.
Your Discovery Season 2 Blu-rays have arrived, and they need to be signed for.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like there's. I don't think just having familiar stuff counts as fan service. If you are drawing a massive attention to it and it becomes the focus of your thing, then yeah, that's fan service. But I don't even know why it's a bad thing, because I don't find it, unless it's taking over your story, I don't really know what else. Jesus.
Well, what about if the story uses old characters and tells a new story with them? Is that fan servicey? Yeah. That's
no.
okay.
Yeah, why would that be fan servicey?
Because I guess my argument for if I were to argue that it would just be, at a certain point, I feel like you get a little bit of diminishing returns with that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think that the new Star Wars really does it poorly, but I can't even really argue for that point. I was just kind of bringing it up as a devil's advocate. But I guess my definition of whether or not something would be fan servicey is just a kind of weakness of the story outside of the references that they're making. And so maybe you don't even need to have intent to do fan service. It could just be like a byproduct of having kind of a boring story that you're using other things and people get attached to it.
See, I think the counterpoint to this would be, and someone on the chat brought up that they said when it comes to Discovery, there was not enough fan service to make it feel like Star Trek, where I would say there's too much fan service in Discovery. And that's the kind of bad fan service I'm talking about, where they are using it just for the sake of using it and being like, hey, look at this, when it doesn't actually have anything of note to do with the story that they're telling.
Yeah.
Like having a tribble on Lorca's desk is not helping anything.
Right.
Or, you know, like that's the kind
Gorn
of stuff
skeleton.
The Gorn skeleton, drawing attention to that stuff is not helping your story. Whereas I think this show, it's like they are using the elements of Star Wars to tell a new story. It's like Rogue One. I think Rogue One did the same thing, where they used recognizable elements from Star Wars to tell a new story.
Sure.
I wouldn't call that fan service.
At
least not in the negative connotation way, you know?
Is it a problem that we go back to Tatooine in a universe full of billions of planets almost constantly? Is that
probably,
fan servicing?
Yeah.
Is that well, like,
again, if they're telling the story that we think that they're telling, Tatooine is the place that they kind of have to go.
Yeah, it's where villains hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would assume there's a lot of planets where they hang out, though. And
sure. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think it's a problem because they've come back there like 8 times. You know, it's and the Tatooine.
Well, I guess they've never been there since the Return of the Jedi, I think.
No, man, that's where fucking Anakin lived, was Tatooine.
I guess I'm thinking of. Am I thinking of chronological? I thought I read a review. Maybe they were talking about chronologically in terms of the story. They haven't been back there.
Okay, what is that?
As a viewer, it doesn't change anything. Nothing.
No, that doesn't. Yeah, they've gone to Tatooine in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 9 Star Wars movies, which is probably too much. You know, like Anakin Skywalker being born on Tatooine, that feels fan servicey to me, because that's not really adding anything to your story other than for the sake of being like, oh, hey, look, it's Tatooine.
Yeah, it runs in the family. They're all from there.
Yeah. It's like when your dad leaves and you find out when you're 18 that he lives like 2 doors down from you.
And didn't know him all that well.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a weird, the fan service thing is a weird line you have to walk, cuz like if you're a fan of the franchise, what do you want? You know? And I'm not saying like that's a legitimate question for me, because I feel like at this point I don't even really know what fans of stuff want.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, right?
Right.
If you are too similar to what came before, people go, oh, this is just a ripoff. That's what the Force Awakens. Everyone goes, this is just a ripoff. You're just ripping
Sure.
off whatever. If you're too far, if you're the Last Jedi, people go, this isn't fucking Star Wars. What the fuck is this? Like, I don't want to watch this. So you're stuck in this weird,
But
boring
then people
middle.
complain about fan servicey stuff, and then Rogue One comes out, and they're like, "This is exactly what I want. I just
Right.
want Star Wars 77 done again."
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
It's like, I don't think.
What would you personally want out of? What would you say is the proper mix of a fan service reference? Like, what do you think that this series, The Mandalorian? You seem to think that this one does the best job of mixing those things in an organic way, where you're creating a new story while simultaneously referencing all these things that people know, and therefore it's a good middle ground to end up on. Do you think there's anything that The Mandalorian is doing wrong in that respect?
I could. Well, I could. Well, I was gonna say every episode doesn't need to have something in it, but they kind of pick and choose. It seems like one thing per episode is a reference to the past. This one had a few of them, but like in the last one, it was just the ATST.
That's true.
In the second episode, it was just the Jawas. I don't actually remember what happened in the third episode. Oh, that's when he goes back.
That's when he brings.
Stormtroopers.
Yeah, the stormtroopers are there.
So I feel like they've done a pretty good job of keeping the elements fairly limited. If this one, I guess you could count, if you want to count Tatooine. I think Tatooine itself kind of counts for everything in this one.
Yeah, if you go to that planet, you're familiar with everything that go. Like the they have the scene with the Raiders where they sneak up on him, very similar to how they sneak up on Luke in A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of appear behind you.
Yeah.
Really pointless. That scene I think is bad, because that scene is such an easy resolution. He's like, here, give them your binoculars. And then they just tell them where to go. It's like the only reason to do that is to introduce them because you're familiar with the Raiders and because they do that kind of thing. And that's probably the weakest it ever gets to me. I just think
that's also a situation though where like if they have a scene where they're going through the desert of Tatooine and they don't encounter Tusken Raiders, are there going to be people who are going to be like, where are the Tusken Raiders?
Probably. Yeah. They should be there. You should run into them.
My problem with that scene, and I think it's a problem for a lot of other scenes in this episode too, is if you've seen the video showing the special effects for how they do the special effects for this episode, which is it's hilarious. It's super, super cool, but it's a hilariously high tech way of doing a very low tech thing. It's essentially the joke of having a screen behind someone and with playing footage from like a train coming at them while they stand in front of the screen. It's the highest tech version of that as possible. So they've got they're standing in front of these big screens that have projected these amazing CGI backgrounds to them, but it's really no different than what they were doing in the 50s when they were shooting Westerns and stuff.
Yeah.
However, now that I know that, I've started to notice that the staging of a lot of this stuff feels incredibly limited.
Yeah.
And so there's not a lot of movement in space. So you've got that scene with the Tusken Raiders where they just show up and then they just kind of stand across from each other and don't really do anything. And then later on, when they meet up with the person, they just kind of stand there and they can't really move in the space because they're on a small stage.
Yeah.
It feels stagey and it feels small. Even though they're in the middle of this amazingly created vista and everything.
Well, that's in canon.
It's really
that's how the prequels feel at the same time. The prequels feel that way.
Well, this one they haven't had 5 minutes of walking through a CGI library for no apparent reason yet, but we'll get there.
Matt Rosk asks, where are the Jawas? Because we asked where are the Tusken Raiders, and Kyle says they're on every planet other than Tatooine at this point. Yeah, they've kind of spread
left,
like
man.
a diaspora across the universe.
I don't know how, but they did it.
Well, the entire Star Wars universe is Tatooine, I suppose, at this point. So I guess that is it. Yeah, is there anything else to really say about this one?
It is kind of funny how in the first movie they refer to Tatooine as like the furthest place from anything.
Yeah.
But everybody seems to go there.
You can't help but bump into it if you're just in that universe. You have Mos Eisley, spaceport guy talks to you, and you do all that stuff. Let me see here. Let's. I guess we can wrap it up with thoughts more specifically of this episode. We had when we talked and recorded our Star Trek wine episode, which comes out on Friday for everyone listening. We're just like, is this a series that you can do episodic coverage of? Or is it just one of those things like just watch them all and then talk about it at the end as like a season sort of wrap up or season summary as opposed to episodic? I tried to brainstorm about what this episode is, and the best I can do is that it's Unforgiven, except the junior version of Unforgiven. And it's like, there's more to talk about with Unforgiven than this. I just don't feel, I saw the story. I didn't mind it. I thought it was a little bit slow. It didn't really... I wouldn't recommend this series to someone. I don't think particularly if someone like was not familiar with this world. If you're familiar with the world of Star Wars, you're watching this, I would assume. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say like this is a series that you should definitely watch. There's something interesting going on here. It feels more simple than that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends what you're trying to get out of it. If someone asked me should I watch The Mandalorian, I would say I don't know. It's a lot of fun. If that's what you're looking for, then yeah, give it a shot. If you're looking for The Wire, don't watch Mandalorian.
Yeah.
I don't think I would not recommend it explicitly, but I think it would probably be a conditional recommend.
Yeah. I guess it is just Star Wars fans are going to like it, I think, which we've seen is what has happened from it. Mm-hmm. I just wish that or if it's a kid show, I can't complain. I'm not going to stand up and say people shouldn't watch Dora the Explorer either, but it's like maybe this Dora is not exactly for me. But if it's not a kid show, I think they're failing on. Well, they should take Pixar's advice, I guess. At that point, then they should make a show that is for kids, but adults get something deeper out of it. There are jokes and references and sort of storylines that are made for adults, so that you don't lose your mind while watching it in the way that Toy Story or the Pixar movies do. And I don't know if this one really does it. I don't think there's enough thematically to chew on that I care about or nuance to this where I can't get anything else outside of the very simple plot that they're giving me, which is totally fine for kids.
Yeah. It's interesting. This show, when I talk about how it feels like they forgot how to do episodic TV, this feels like that the people who made it have never watched episodic TV and don't know how much you can do with how little time you have. Because the thing that I keep thinking watching this is Doctor Who, and how it feels similar to Doctor Who, where every episode of Doctor Who, they end up in a different time or a different planet. There's different monsters and shit. And they usually tell a story that is an episodic story inside of a larger serialized season-long arc.
Yep.
That exists in and of itself and has characters that are generally, the best episodes of Doctor Who have great characters, a great story with lots of twists and turns that you feel very satisfied at the end of, and can work for kids and can work for adults. And this doesn't seem to be trying to do that. I think we said it somewhere else where it's like they're just trying to hit a single, essentially.
Yep. Just trying to get on base. Really, don't screw this up.
And they did.
Yeah.
They got on base.
Yep.
I mean, I think there's a lot more that they could be doing. I'm not really sure why they're not doing it, or maybe this is all just. You know how You know how a lot of movie directors will, in between movies, they'll go and shoot commercials to like work on stuff or
Yeah,
like try
keep
out
their
new things.
chops sharp while they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this kind of feels like that, where this is kind of like, well, let's try this thing out and see how it works and see if we can do this successfully. It almost feels like an experiment.
yeah,
Um,
likely is. If you're going to expand
yeah,
this universe into an MCU type thing, how it's
yeah,
both whether or not you can artistically do it and how the fandom reacts to it. If they're accepting of something that's a mild enough change like this, where you just kind of imprint Star Wars, you put the Star Wars theme on top of a traditional Western and see what happens with it.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's why it feels kind of, that's also why it feels kind of fan filmy, because it feels like an experiment. Like they're trying stuff out, seeing if they can get this to work. And then at the end of the season, if it went well, if people liked it, they're like, oh, okay. Or maybe we can expand. I mean, maybe that's the idea. Maybe
Yeah.
if it's the lowest stakes thing they could come up with that would still be satisfying, and if it works, the next season they'll do, expand it out and be like, all right, now we can really do it.
Yep. Or a new
Or
series, a new
yeah,
show.
or a new series where they can take what they learned here and work it into something else. I
I'd
don't know.
agree.
We'll see.
Matt Ross, thank you very much for the super chats. Very kind of you.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
to have you here. If it's Unforgiven, Clint is Mando. The blind or hard sighted guy is the young bounty hunter.
Oh, definitely.
There is no Morgan Freeman character, I don't think. And
No.
then Hackman would just be that enemy bounty hunter who doesn't perfectly fit, but has the role of that character, I guess.
Yeah, that's a stretch. I mean, when I say it's Unforgiven stripped down to just Clint Eastwood and the kid,
And the kid, yeah.
essentially.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't have any of the themes or anything that Unforgiven has.
Although the kid is what they call Baby Yoda. So there's a little bit of a tie-in there, right? They call him the kid.
Sure.
I think they do.
And he's not Yoda. I don't know what he is. That's why he should be called Yodler.
Yodler, little baby Yodler. They toned him down too in this one, interestingly. But yeah, I think we're done talking about this one.
I think. Sorry, the last thing I would say is the baby thing is weird to me, because if you're going off of like Lone Wolf and Cub, right? The whole thing about Lone Wolf and Cub is that he constantly has this kid with him. In every episode of this show, he shoves the kid in a closet.
Yeah.
So, and he goes off without the kid. And so the kid can't cause any mischief during their whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's weird to have this thing that is the part of the engine of your show. And it is part of, that should be the genesis of drama and action and story. But every episode starts with him trying to not having it part of anything. It's very weird.
He's kind of like a new hamster owner. Like hamsters are very good at getting out of their cages. But so like if you're unfamiliar with it, you don't put a book on top of it. You just put it back into the cage and then it gets out again. I feel like that's how Mandalorian treats Yoda. He always puts it back into its crib or its little bassinet thing, and it always gets out and just walks around to wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, like in this one, he puts him in a closet or a little compartment or something. And it's like in the last episode, you saw him, using his hands to unscrew stuff and playing your radio or whatever he was doing. And you're going to assume he's not going to climb out of this thing? I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's surprising that Yoda is not, little baby Yoda, Yodler is not as prominent as you think. Or really just the fact that no one has appeared yet who gives you any insight into why they want baby Yoda. Like he hasn't had a villain speech where he briefly encounters Werner Herzog or something, who manages to tell him in a couple sentences before he escapes what the big plan is about why they're doing this.
Yeah. Like think of this episode. If they're going off on this mission, the mission's pretty straightforward and they don't really run into that many problems. If baby Yoda is with them, that creates a possible tension as to, what he gets up to while they're on the thing. And does the Mandalorian, is he focusing on the kid when he should be focusing on the mission? The guy with him is starting to get suspicious. Why would you bring a kid? It's like it
Baby
makes
Yoda prevents him from getting a bounty. Like Baby Yoda gets in the way, and that's like, is this thing worth keeping around? Because he's kind of interfering with my life at this point.
And I mean, if you think about how this episode ends, they the assassin who they kill says to the guy, he's got a huge bounty on his head, and supposedly he has this thing with him. Some people say it's a child. And so then that dude leaves, goes back to where the ship is, and then kidnaps this child, does he even know the kid exists? He shouldn't, right?
He saw him before then, right? He sees them when they leave together.
Oh, he does.
I
Okay,
think so,
all right.
yeah.
Well, still, it feels a little bit weird that it, whereas if it's there the whole time, it becomes more. I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah. But it feels like having the yodeler with him would create more story instead of just being a nuisance that you got to put to the side every time.
Agreed. All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much, guys, for checking in on the live stream.
We should mention one more thing.
Sure.
The stinger at the end, Boba Fett. What do you think?
I wouldn't. I know so little that if I hadn't read that online, that's potentially who it is, I wouldn't have gathered that just by watching it.
That's why I said it's the only reason that they would go back to Tatooine is because that's where Boba Fett got eaten by the Sarlacc.
Yep.
And I know at least in the books or the post-original, yeah, he jetpacks out of there or something. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were doing this. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, he feels too big for this in some ways. Like, if you just have a character that's so recognizable from the actual franchise movies, it would feel strange. It would be like if Luke Skywalker just appeared in this. You'd be like, what the hell? Like, where did he come from out of this? Maybe Boba Fett's small enough because he's really just a fantasy that he's important in some scheme of things. But I would be surprised if it is Boba Fett and not just someone who... Well, Filoni doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would go back on the book canon. So I was going to say if someone found his armor or something and put it on and was not really him, but was just pretending or something. But I don't think there's been no thematic relevance to whether or not it is being Boba Fett. You know, it's not like a revisiting your past or like the ghosts of previous Mandalorians, kind of maybe a little bit with the Mandalorian falling apart.
If you want to get really technical about it, Boba Fett's not a Mandalorian. And
that's
neither
true.
is the Mandalorian.
Neither is this guy. Yeah,
so
that's
there is some sort of thematic
connection
thing
there.
It's just also hilarious that it's like they just made a show about Boba Fett, but it's not Boba Fett.
Yeah.
He's not actually a Mandalorian. He's also a bounty hunter. It's weird that it's not Boba Fett, but it's basically Boba Fett.
Yeah, he's got a different color, therefore he is not the same person. He's the skin switch, as they say.
Whoever it is, it has to be a Mandalorian, though. Or it has to be wearing Mandalorian armor because he's got the same spur sound when he walks, and he's got that little cape there. So it's got to be somebody in Mandalorian armor.
We'll see. I'm sure they'll reveal next week what it is, and I think next week is also Friday, and then the next episode after that comes out on the Wednesday because they didn't want to interfere with the Rise of Skywalker. So we'll have to figure that out. A character is in possible possession of his armor, though, but that's only implied. That's in the books from Kyle.
Can we do a video or a YouTube thing that comes out the day Rise of Skywalker comes out and name it All the Things Wrong with Rise of Skywalker, and then we just talk about Mandalorian for the whole time?
They'll call that clickbait.
Yeah, that's how people make money doing this.
That's all it is. I know. The podcast.
Or do I have to make a video where I completely take you down?
The podcasts get comments about how the Star Wars videos are clickbait because people click them expecting to see the full episode, and I always laugh at that because it's like, how can you not find a Star Trek episode? It's on like every streaming service at this point, buddy. Just go find them.
They think our Star Trek coverage is clickbait because they're expecting to see video of the.
They want to see the episode, yeah, because the title of the episode is in the title of the video, so they're clicking it thinking that it's the episode of the thing, even though it says podcast on it. But
yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
Bill Burr next week, that'll be good.
Oh, really? Oh,
that's what Kyle says. Guys, thank you. We have to take off. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for the super chat, Matt Ross. Very kind of you. And we'll be back with the next Mandalorian after that. Otherwise, all the usual stuff will keep coming out. Star Trek comes out tomorrow. The wine tasting thing comes out on Friday. I guess that's it. Clay, anything you want to say before we're done?
No, I don't think so.
Right.
The question and answer episode of Badass Podcast, if you're a listener of that, will be out, I think, tomorrow. And the new issue of Sean's book came out, Curse of the White Knight, today. So check that out if you get the chance.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you'll just have to send that to me and we can post it easily enough. But yeah, you can look for it. That'll come out soon. The Q&A will come out soon, obviously, if not tomorrow, sometime after day after that or something. I think that's it. See you guys. Thanks, Matt Ross. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for talking. Everyone else who's in there. I think those are just the names that I saw, though. Thank you very much for listening. Let us know what you thought about The Mandalorian. We'll be on the Discord. I think I saw some spoilers that I hadn't clicked on yet anyway, so I'll check those out. But otherwise, we're done. Thanks very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you later.